My name is Janelle Feller. I'm the Executive Director of Friends Against Abuse. In January of this year, we noticed that there were several senior citizens coming in that were suffering from financial exploitation by family members. It caused us to ask a couple of questions, and in the process of asking the questions, we found out that uh, financial exploitation is something that happens a lot, and not a lot of people talk about it. Um, so, as as an organization, we decided that we should pull together a panel of local professionals to talk about what is financial exploitation, what does it look like in our small and rural community. So we've pulled those people together here today to talk a little bit more about this. These again are all local professionals that you have access to, and we'll have the specific information, contact information, at the end of the presentation. So first, we have Kim Wimmer, who is the General Counsel for True Star Federal Credit Union. We also have with us Mike Kostek, Captain of the International Falls Police Department. Next, we have Esther Geishen, who is the AARP Fraud Network Volunteer. And we'll follow up with Renee Whitbeck, a social worker for Coochin County. She works with adults, and she also does daycare licensing. So with that, we'll begin with Kim. Kim, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to be here.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kim Wimmer, and I am an attorney. I work right now, I'm the General Counsel for True Star Federal Credit Union. And in that role, I work when we see issues where people may be being financially exploited or may be the victims of some type of scam or things like that. Oftentimes they will come through my office, and I will get familiar with that in my role and obviously help the people if I'm able to. We also do have a full-time employee whose title is actually loss mitigation specialist, and she deals with this a lot as well. She's a very knowledgeable person, and she deals with the day-to-day issues that we see that come through TrueStar as well. So we work together to come up with some of this information to present to you here today, and that's what I'd like to just touch on as far as what we see in a financial institution when we see some financial exploitation or some scams going on. First, I just have some basic information just to give you an idea of what we see as far as demographics of people coming in, what type of losses that we've seen, and just some basic information for you. So first topic is, do we see a particular demographic? Is it there an age or a gender or something that we see? And the answer to that is we see everything across the board. So we've had teenagers, unfortunately, that have been the victims of scams, all the way up to some older people as well. It covers all age ranges, covers all genders, covers all people with different backgrounds, and it really doesn't discriminate. We see people that have been having to deal with this across all walks of life. So if you or a family member have experienced this as well, just know that you're not alone. We see it across all groups of people. Another just kind of general piece of information as far as what we see in the financial institution world most often is that the scams are either done online or over the phone most often for what we're seeing. I realize that there are other venues where people might see something different, but a lot of times people don't ever meet these people. They don't ever see these people. It's something where their only contact with the scammer or the fraudster is via an online or phone type relationship or however they're transacting with this person or people. As far as the range of losses that we've seen, again, that there's quite a wide range of that as well. A lot of times, it'll be maybe a one-time thing where it's several $100s or several $1,000s. That's something that's really not all that unusual, to see something like that as far as a dollar amount that we're dealing with. Some very sad cases, we have been involved in some cases where it's been over $100,000, where people have been part of a scam or been exploited to the tune of that amount of money. So it really can be a wide range there too. And another thing, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but as far as, do we see where these come in as a one-time situation where they're scammed one time, or it's something that it occurs over a period of time? That's all over the board too. Sometimes we have people come in and it is a one-time thing, and then they question it and realize what has happened, and it's able to stop right there. Other times it's a type of scam, and I'll talk a little bit about the types of scams we see, but where it occurs over a period of time. And there are several different transactions, or even many different transactions, that result in the person being exploited in that manner. So really, it's all across the board is what I want everybody to take away from that, and just know that if you or a family member has experienced this, you're really not alone. So as far as in the financial institution setting, I just want to address what are some of the things that we do to help protect our members, or help protect the people that come in and see us. One thing is our staff, our frontline staff especially, is very knowledgeable about these things, that we see them. It's not something that we've never seen before, we've never heard before, or we've never talked about before, so we see them. So if we see a person come in that something is off, either the transaction doesn't seem quite right, or the person's demeanor doesn't seem quite right, or just something is off, a lot of times our first step is just to start asking a few questions. And questions like, were you expecting this to come to you? Are you familiar with the person this is coming from? And we'll just kind of start to have those conversations with our member or the person in front of us to see if we can't get a handle on what's going on. And sometimes a conversation like that might help stop the situation before it gets any further. We're able to have a conversation, and we realize that, and more importantly, the member realizes that this is maybe something that's going to be a scam, or they're going to fall victim to. We sometimes that doesn't work though, or sometimes the member is convinced, or they don't think that what we're saying holds true, and we will always encourage them, if we're still skeptical of what's going on, to talk to a trusted family member or friend about what the particular transaction, if they have someone they feel they can trust. And if they do have someone, we're hopeful that might help as well. If that doesn't work, we at times, and we're going to have someone from law enforcement here talk later today, but we have referred people to talk to law enforcement. We know that they deal with these types of things as well. And if we're fairly certain what we're dealing with is a scam or some type of exploitation, we're just really trying to put an end to the situation so the person isn't victimized or victimized further. So anybody we can get the person to talk to kind of understand that is the steps that we try to take. If we're still unsuccessful, we are able to put some types of limits on the services that we will allow. Just it's ultimately the member's money or the person's money, and if they can't come in and want to take their money, they can take their money unless there's something else that's in place to prevent that. But we can, if we see a series of things that are happening that we're concerned about, we can no longer allow wire services, for example, to the member. If we're seeing that they're wiring out large sums of money, or we're skeptical about what's going on there, we can do things like that. We also will frequently put holds on checks if we question the authenticity, or whether a check is counterfeit, or we think there's something wrong with that. We will do things like that as well, just to do what we can on our end, recognizing that the member is entitled to their money, of course, but if there are things like that we can put in place to protect the situation, we will certainly do that. And then if we still, after those things, we take those types of actions on our end. If we're still concerned, or we're still thinking that this is not a good situation for the person in front of us, we will report the situation to the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center, which is a number that we can call and, just explain what's going on. We don't give any information that we cannot give. This is a system that's set up by law, and we follow all the rules and everything associated with that. but then they are able to look into the matter further. And we've made that report. And I understand that sometimes it might take several reports for, if I understand the system correctly, and I know we'll have people more familiar with that we'll be talking later too, but we do utilize that if it gets to that situation. Just another little piece of information before I turn it over to the next person here. I got the question presented to me, what can we do on our end to recover lost funds? And unfortunately, on our end, the answer is a lot of times there's not a lot we can do. If the funds have already been sent, if it's a situation where sometimes we run into situations where a person has sent cash, or they've given their banking information, like their online banking information, and a transaction has already taken place. They've authorized it. They've given their bank PIN number or whatever it is. A lot of times we can't go back and undo that, especially if it's something that's been authorized by the person. But what we can do with those things I mentioned earlier is hopefully prevent future losses. Is we'll do everything we can to get back what we can get back, but we're looking at really trying to prevent this from happening further, or prevent further transactions from taking place. And then just to wrap up, as far as any advice I would give to you or loved ones, I would just say, and I said this at the beginning too, but I think it's really important, is, you know, if you're encountering this with yourself or someone you know or love, just don't feel embarrassed, don't feel ashamed, seek help. There are people in our community that are here to help you. You can come talk to the people at the financial institution or law enforcement, I'm sure, or the county, but it happens to more people than you would realize. And I just really would encourage people to seek help. If you have a loved one that you notice has a change in demeanor, change in spending habits, they're all of a sudden, they used to save all kinds of money and all of a sudden money's going out the door and you don't understand, just don't be afraid to have those conversations, and understand that the person you're talking to may have been told to keep things a secret and not share with anybody as part of the scam, and just understand that that might be taking place. And with all of that being said, I guess I would end by saying there are really no hard and fast rules when it comes to these situations, the scams or exploitation. It could be about anything you could dream up, it could happen. We've seen it with COVID. COVID is a new situation in our community. All of a sudden, scams are tied to COVID now because that's a new thing. So just be alert, and don't give out personal information. And if you do fall victim, please don't be afraid to seek help.
Thank you, Kim. I wanted to ask you, is within, because while you're a credit union, I would assume that banks and credit unions are similar in how they handle these things. So if let's say that I send a check, or you see something in my account that is unusual or a large amount, is there any systems that would warn or give a warning to the institution itself to say, hey, this is odd?
I would imagine that every institution might do that a little bit differently. I know we have protections in place where we might review, kind of on an audit type standpoint, review transactions over a certain dollar amount or something like that, where we might catch something like that. I would say more often than a global thing like that, where we're going to run into it most or try and catch it most, is on an individual level. Like if an individual comes into the branch and we pull up their account to do some type of transaction and notice something just doesn't seem right, knowing everything else we know about that account, that's where we're going to catch it more often than system wide, I guess.
Okay. I was curious. Are there any other questions? Does anybody else have any questions of Kim? Thank you, Kim. I appreciate you being here and sharing that. It's a little unsettling to know that it can affect anybody of any age, any income, education, socioeconomic status. I'm surprised by that. I thought it would be a little more focused, but thank you. Thank you for your contribution. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mike Kostek, Captain Kostek.
Hey guys. like you said, I'm the captain of the police department, also lead investigator. And as a result, I've had to follow up on just about every one of these instances that you mentioned. Kim, I know you had a lot of the high points that I would have talked about. Um, I don't, there is a bit of a misconception with the population that if they lose money, that if they call the police, that we can get it back. And unfortunately, that is very difficult for us to do. These crimes generally operate outside of our jurisdiction, sometimes different countries. Um, and so we try to focus on prevention than rather than dealing with it after the fact. We hope through education and putting the word out on how to avoid falling into these traps that they can hopefully just stay away and not have to call us at all. That being said, we have noticed some kind of common threads running through all of our calls, and unfortunately, a lot of it is the aging population in the area. What I've noticed is as our population even pre-COVID, but with COVID, becomes more isolated, they rely on the electronic methods of communicating. And as you mentioned, Kim, a lot of these scams are also now utilizing that and pretending to be relatives, saying they're in jail. Can you send some money to us? So the big takeaway from this is these people, particularly the aging population, they don't talk to their relatives as much as they probably should. And as a result, they have no idea what's going on outside their bubble. And they very easily fall victim to these crimes, whether that means wiring money, giving personal information, even something as simple as a password to a Facebook account, which could lead to a whole variety of issues security wise, right? So what we try to do is get the word out that any kind of information given should be given with a grain of salt, not to try. Unfortunately, it's tough to do it with an aging population, but don't be as trusting as you normally would have. People will take advantage of that. So what we've seen also is a lack of reporting. And what I feel is happening, and doing a cursory examination of the data that we have on record for the past few years, it doesn't look like there's a big problem in the area with scams and the financial exploitation. My suspicion is that it's a lot larger, and there's a sense of embarrassment with the elderly population feeling they were taken advantage of or falling victim to this. As a result, they're not reporting it. They're staying quiet. As you mentioned, there could be repeat occurrences of giving out financial information or giving money. We've seen that too. I'm sure our financial institutions in town can attest to that, that there have been frequent times when people are so embarrassed by giving money one time that they just keep doing it in the hopes that either stops or they get the results they're looking for, which never happens, right? Again, that goes to we want to keep pushing the prevention rather than relying on us to get their money back. So with that being said, I would say that to keep mine relatively short and sweet, I would like to impress upon the population that there's just some key safety points that you need to make sure you keep in mind and relay this to your elderly family members, friends, everything. Keep the lines of communication open. Talk to people, the people you haven't maybe seen in a year or more. Maybe the people who are living by themselves and are lonely enough to answer these phone calls from random strangers and give this information. Um, they may also not get the information I'm pushing forward. So if you do happen to see this, I would appreciate if you could maybe just spread the word out to everyone to explain the dangers of this, to not give out personal information of any kind to anyone that you don't know, and even those you do know. Like I said, take it with a grain of salt and talk to people in person if possible, rather than relying on someone over the phone saying this is so and so, right? And it goes back to that we've said this for years. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So in the event people are promising you money, go deposit this check, take a picture of this, send it back to me with your account number on it. Obviously, there's some red flags there, but also in financial hardships that may be too hard to pass up. So we need to get the word out that, as Kim mentioned, all of this COVID related stuff too, people are really tying into the difficulties people are facing and using that to their advantage. I would also advise to just maybe do some cursory examination of password protection programs you can use. frequently, most are guilty of this. We use one password for multiple accounts. So if one gets compromised, it's very easy for the rest of them to get compromised as well, and that can include your financial data, right? I would choose, as far as that goes, I would choose different ones, particularly if you want to keep certain ones like your banking account information separate, use a separate one for that. When you get a call, and I'll use the example because I just dealt with one recently of an aging lady who got a call that her grandchild was in jail in Jamaica and needed money right away to get out of jail. She was smart enough to slow down, which we always advise, take a breath and make calls before you immediately send this money, right? They'll impress on you that this has to be done right now. You need to step on this. You need to give the money right away. You can't think about it. And that's all one of their methods to get you to send this money without questioning. So I'd also advise slow down, talk to a trusted loved one or the police because we're always available, and move from there. I would also say that our area has been blanketed with a lot of unwanted texts and emails, particularly the text. I've noticed a lot of complaints coming in that people are getting texts from what originates as an email, which is a red flag in itself, not just an unknown number, but an actual email address. Never open any of those. They can take you to who knows where and compromise the data on your phone also. So that's another security concern. Again, I would reiterate that I would hope that anyone who listens to this could reach out to anyone they haven't maybe been speaking to and open those lines of communication to prevent any of this from occurring. But I also want to stress that anytime you want to call the police department for anything, we're always there and we can help you through anything you've been going through. I just don't want, I don't want people to get their hopes up as far as contacting us because we have a very low success rate for clearance as far as scams that originate outside of our jurisdiction. Anytime we're dealing with a local, albeit rare, as far as a financial exploitation involving a family member who lives in town, that's one issue. But if you're dealing with something that's originating from a different country or state, it's going to be extremely difficult for us to even locate the source, much less regain any of the lost financial. And you know, I don't have a lot more than that. I just always end everything with it. If you're in doubt, you can always call the police department, and we can help you out with any of the problems you have. And a small community, we want to make sure everyone's cared for. So just make sure you call us if you need anything, all right?
Thank you for that. So when Kim was talking, she said that she's seen situations that are people have been exploited of as low as 100 to as high as $100,000. Have you seen? Is that the same range that you've seen as well?
Yeah, and in those cases, Kim would be working with whatever the Coaching County Sheriff's Office or our department in regards to those. Just as concerning, though, I would say, would be the loss of the social security numbers or account information. We've already had several cases of people attempting to file taxes and finding out that they've already been filed because someone got their personal data, right? So it's all it. While the financial stuff is terrible, that is, I would say, few and far between compared to the loss of the secure data such as social security information, which can have far-reaching consequences, you know, years into the future.
Sure, sure. Are there any other questions?
Hi, Mike. I'm just curious. I'm wondering if it just happens to be what we've seen recently or if there is an actual trend. But it seems to me we've run into a few situations lately where the person has been threatened either with jail or, you know, some type of threat. And I don't remember, we've seen a handful recently, and I'm just wondering if you're seeing an increase in that type of situation or that just happens to be what has come across our desks recently.
You know, it's funny you say that. It isn't, I wouldn't say new because it's been happening for several years, but my own father received a call a couple years ago saying the sheriff's department was on their way over if they didn't send the money. Now, just thinking if that were someone who had no connection to any kind of local law enforcement, didn't know anything, how differently that call could have turned out, right? I think like I was saying, I think it is more widespread, whether through luck, maybe people aren't losing money. My suspicion is they're probably just not reporting due to embarrassment, which is unfortunate. But when you're dealing with the population, as they get a little older, they aren't as quick to call us with stuff they feel they may be responsible for. So that's another thing. We really want to spread the word that you're not responsible, you're a victim. And our job is to help victims. And that's part of what we're trying to get accomplished today.
Right. Even if you can't return the lost funds, at least you're aware of the situation and can be on the watch for that. But because that's what you're saying is that it's very unlikely that you'll be able to replace any lost funds. And in the banking institution, they can't really replace the lost funds either. But at least you'd be aware of what's going on and what's happening out in the community. So you encourage them to call in. Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Esther, you're next.
I'm here now as a volunteer with AARP's Fraud Network. I got interested in this as the Northeastern Minnesota Regional Manager for the Alzheimer's Association. And my territory included Kutchison County. And what I saw an awful lot of was financial exploitation by family members. And then as I became more involved with the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and so forth, I got more familiar with the scams and fraud by strangers. And so that's my assigned topic, is how are senior citizens vulnerable to fraud and scams. And of course, a lot of what I have in my notes has already been covered. And so I'm going to try to skim through that. I will try not to verge off into stories or examples of things from our area. One of the questions that comes up is, well, what's the difference between a fraud and a scam? Well, they're kind of interchangeable terms. I think that scams are a form of fraud, and fraud is a form of financial exploitation, and financial exploitation is a form of elder abuse. So if you're going to do a ladder, it kind of works that way. I think scams generally are more trickery involved, where it's an imposter, pretending to be somebody else, where, you write a bad check, it's fraud. That's not really a scam. But when somebody, calls you that they're your grandson and they need money to get out, it's an imposter situation and it's trickery. So whether it matters or not, but I think it's, in kind of a scheme of things. As others have said, anybody is vulnerable. A weak moment and a skilled scammer. I mean, you've probably all heard of somebody that got taken by the driveway gravel scam. It's just so easy. Somebody pulls up and they say, oh, we've got this gravel left over from a road we were working on, and we need to dump it. Do you want it? And it just, and people get roped in, and then they start threatening them to collect the money. So it's just anybody. Some estimates are 1 in 6 people have lost money to a phone scam. Some say 1 in 10 are victimized by fraud. So we don't really know how many, because as others have said, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to admit it. They just feel embarrassed that they got taken. Older adults are often targeted because they're the ones that have money. If you're looking for money, you'll go where it is. They're often more vulnerable because they may be more isolated, more lonely, more trusting. There's some neurological research that indicates that there may be brain changes with age that negatively affect people's decision-making, financial decisions. And, of course, people with dementia are at extremely higher risk. Vulnerability to risk is not always what we might expect. An example that I got from the Minnesota manager from ARP was that an investment fraud vulnerability study showed that the composite victim for investment fraud is more likely to be male, 70 years or older, married, a veteran, and accustomed to making their own trades. So they're people that think they're savvy in the investment. And research done at the U of M showed that the risk factors for engaging in different types of scams and risk factors for losing money in the scams varied with income, education, financial literacy, and other factors, with higher income and higher education making some people more at risk. And the scams are going by phone, by text, by email, they're in person, they're social media, they're pop-ups on internet sites, they're dating sites, they're online games. There's almost always an imposter, somebody claiming to be the IRS, your bank, credit card company, tech support, Amazon, Medicare. My partner regularly gets these calls from Amazon about his account being compromised or shipment of a package. He doesn't have an Amazon account. I get text messages from US Bank saying my account is frozen and I need to call them. Well, the number isn't US Bank's number. But, you know, I have a US Bank account. He gets the same text. He doesn't have a US Bank account, so, you know, he doesn't even have to think twice about it. But the tactics are always urgency or befriending, building trust, using threats, and working on secrecy. The range of losses, as has been said, hundreds to thousands to millions of dollars, depending on the scam and the resources of the person being scammed. 50 billion a year is lost to fraud in the United States, it's estimated. Many people have lost their life savings, they've lost their homes. We've had, you know, when we did the elder abuse awareness forums in the Twin Ports, we had, you know, examples of someone who was befriended at a casino in person by someone just looking for vulnerable people going to the casino by themselves, befriended them. Pretty soon he had title to her property, access to all of her bank accounts, wasn't filling her prescriptions because he was gambling the money. As Mike had said, you know, if they get access to the bank accounts and to the social security numbers, there's just no end to it. Until they exhaust all of the person's resources or somebody intervenes. And a lot of times people don't even know that they're being stolen from until they go to take money out of savings and find there isn't any there because somebody got their account. Another question was, how long does it take to lose money with scams and frauds? Minutes. And it can go on for years. Again, it depends on the scam and the resources of the people, and scammers will re-scam the same person with a new scam, often scamming them that they're going to help them solve the old scam that they just did. And they'll sell the personal information to other scammers. For systems to protect people, I think we've talked about that with consumer protection, but scammers will circumvent those. They want to use wire transfers, gift cards, money orders, or cash to keep financial institutions out of it for all the reasons Kim gave. I do think there's some greater awareness of the wire transfers. I was making a return at Walmart recently and saw warning signs all over the place about wire transfers. And they had been one of the ones that a lot of the scam wire transfers have been going through. So, as Mike said, there really not much can be done to recover the lost funds. But still, people, as Mike said, should report it. And in addition to reporting it to law enforcement, reporting it to places like the Better Business Bureau, the Federal Trade Commission, and AARP can get it on the radar, so to speak, of other people who might be scammed, because those places all have websites listing the current scams that are traveling around. And when I made a report on the Better Business Bureau one, there was even a way to do it by location. so that other people in that area would know there was somebody around doing these driveway scams with the gravel. A lot of the things I'm protecting have been covered. You know, the main thing is don't answer calls from unknown callers. If you answer and find out, hang up. People think that they're smart by toying with the callers and playing games with them and stuff. They're not. They're just putting themselves probably at more risk. The longer you talk to them, the bigger chance there is that you're going to give them information they shouldn't have. As has been said, never give personal information before verifying that the call is legitimate. Don't accept friend requests from people you don't know. Don't click on pop-ups on the internet. Don't open emails from, there's just so many don'ts. And the research supports, though, that the best thing for preventing people from being taken by a scam is them having heard of that exact scam. And we had a really great example with one of the police officers in Superior, whose mother or aunt, I can't remember which, just would not believe him that it was a romance scam. You know, she just had found her soulmate, and she said, "You're a cop. You're suspicious of everybody." And he kept telling her. She kept telling him how this guy was just so wonderful, and he was going to come and see her, and so forth and so on. And he kept saying, "It's not going to happen." And then she called him one day, really, really triumphant, that she had copies of his airline ticket. And he said, "Oh, good. When does it say he's leaving?" 9:00 Thursday morning. And he said, 7:00 Thursday morning, you're going to get a call from him saying that he needs money. "Oh, I will not," she said. 7:00 Thursday morning, she got the call. And that was what stopped her. It just was familiar. And so that has been verified through research that is the best thing we can do, is make people really aware of the scams that are out there and how they work, so that when they hear one, they go, "Oh, I heard about this." And there are many websites, but AERP, the Better Business Bureau, and the FTC all have websites that show what, the scam of the day is and how it works and what the approaches are. And then AARP and FTC also offer scam alert emails. So you can sign up to get what the updates are. And then do advanced planning to prepare for possible future declines in financial decision-making capacity. And have regular discussions with vulnerable adult members about the current scams. If you have those regular conversations, it's a lot more likely they're going to tell you when they get one of those calls. Monitor changes in behavior. Set controls on phone blocking, internet browsing, mail solicitations, available credit access, and so forth. I could go into common scams, but I think you're all aware of them. We've already talked about how COVID scams, just, every opportunity is another thing for scams.
Esther, you mentioned that we have no idea how many people are being financially exploited by their family members. I mean, do we have any idea? Do you think it's more than what people are scammed for? I mean, is it more than the $50 billion a year? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Minnesota Elder Justice Center has covered that fairly often in what they've, what they offer in their webinars and their conferences and so forth. And according to their research and the research of others, more money is lost through family and friend exploitation or trusted advisor exploitation than through the scams and frauds. What we found in doing our forums was that you can get people in the door with scams and frauds because they aren't as personal. And then, then you break the news to them that these are awful, but financial exploitation by the people you trust is much more common.
And I would suspect that gets reported very rarely.
A lot of times it doesn't, unless the person runs out of money to pay their bills. That's usually when it will come. But I worked with so many families where the power of attorney and guardianship was being abused. And the family members were siphoning off the vulnerable adults' money, selling their property, just ripping them off. And the older family member wouldn't report it. And the siblings wouldn't report it. So it's a huge problem.
Well, that's why many of us maybe need to keep eyes on, on each other, really. I mean, to be talking about these things and to be sharing these things, and because anybody is susceptible to it. Wonderful. Thank you, Esther. I appreciate your time. Renee, you are an adult social worker and here in Coochin County, and you were going to talk to us a little bit about conservatorship and guardianship in cases where somebody is recognized as a vulnerable person. Just because you're elderly doesn't make you vulnerable in the same way that we're talking about. So can you tell us a little bit about those things?
I just want to piggyback on a couple things here. First of all, we can also have a vulnerable adult investigation in addition to the criminal. And the advantage with that is that if it's proven, we can have professional licenses taken away, CNA licenses, RN and LPN. So that's one of the tools in our kit we can sometimes use. We work with law enforcement on some of those cases, sometimes not. And the second thing I wanted to say when we were talking about scams, I heard of a new one yesterday. A friend of mine called me and he said that he had received a call from Social Security and they wanted the last 4 digits of his Social Security number. And of course, if he didn't give them out, the police were coming. Well, the person's phone number and email and all of that happened to be one of our workers. And so this person that called him alleged to be one of our own workers in our agency. So I did contact her and say, this is what's going on, and you might want to be aware of it because, I don't know what he was going to do with the last 4 numbers of her, because I don't know how to get the rest of it. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Another thing I wanted to say, too, the boyfriend-girlfriend thing, that's alive and well in International Falls, alive and well. There is a situation that I've been working with quite a while with a woman that's been going after someone with a lot of money. And finally, we were able to get a guardianship, conservatorship, and have this gentleman transferred to a facility where she didn't know where he is. So that's how far we had to go on this one. But he really believed this was his girlfriend, and they were gonna. He started to cash in all his funds, and they were going to run off to Oregon or Washington or someplace together. Fortunately, we caught it. So anyway, some of the things that I've been working with, and I've been working with a lot of guardianships and conservatorships lately, not just from the scam standpoint, but a lot more people in our community that have dementias because we're an aging community. And so actually I worked on one this morning. I have to be back in time to work on another one this afternoon. And so it's just getting really busy in those realms. Some of the things we can do, and they've been touched on a little bit, would be like having other people's names on your account, people you trust that you know are out there for your own good. My sister and I just got our names put on my mom's account because my dad died and my mom's elderly, so we did that. Healthcare directives are huge because you can get very specific in healthcare directives about who should handle what and who you trust. And recently we just did rep payees. Those kind of go underreported in terms of what we can do. There was a gentleman that was a victim to repeated scams. I mean, I straighten some things out, other people straighten some things out, and then you get right back in. So just recently, Social Security let us be, our agency be his rep payee. So we will handle all of his funds, and he won't be able to send them to Russia, to the ladies that are going to get on the plane and fly up here and meet with him in Minneapolis. So that one's working out real well. His bills will get paid. He'll get a certain amount of money to live on, and that will go really well for him. And then ultimately would be the guardianship conservatorships. We like to go from least restrictive to most. And so it's only when we get up into the realm of, where people are really at risk. And then it even becomes difficult because we have to determine with a medical professional, is this just a bad decision you're making, or is there in fact a dementia? So we rely pretty heavily on a physician's statement, on a psychologist's statement, and so forth, to be able to do what we need to do. As part of my agency functions, I do help people get the forms. I will sit with them and complete those forms. I will help them go to court if they request that. And in emergency situations, our agency can act as guardian or conservator. We can go for a period of up to 90 days. We're allowed to do that. And then either the person isn't going to need that for whatever reason, or we'll have to go into a full-blown guardianship or conservatorship. And then we would look to agencies like Lutheran Social Service to assist us in that. And it doesn't matter if there's a lot of money or just a little bit of money. They're all out there, all over the place. The one about the grandson, my mother got one of those calls and she said, well, which grandson is this? And he said, Michael. And she said, I don't have a Michael. So yeah, you have to be really sharp on those, not answer phone calls. Another gentleman I've been working with, he gave out his Medicare number over the phone, and I've been afraid that something's going to happen. So far, so good. So it's always being on top of things. And again, most of the people that I've been working with have been in their late 80s, 90s, up to 98, 99 years old. And then I want to say also, sometimes they're not scams. They're just elderly people that can no longer handle their funds, and they have no family or friends that can do it for them. So we also work, in those areas. So, pretty much what anyone needs with any of those things I mentioned, we can help with and are willing to help with. I've been doing this for 42 years, so I've been doing it a really long time. And as I said, on the other one, I do daycare licensing. So if you guys need daycare, Kim knows.
You do both ends of the spectrum, it sounds like.
I do, and it's fun. One of my friends said to me one time, she said, yep, you get them when they start out in diapers and when they end up in diapers. So. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm getting on the average of the guardianship or conservatorships 1 to 2 a week, and that's phenomenal. That's just phenomenal. So
can you tell me what the difference is between a conservatorship and a guardianship? I mean,
a conservatorship, conservatorship handles the financial matters, anything to do with finances. A guardianship handles the non-financial, although there is a line in there that says, in the absence of a conservator, you have the authority to do a few things there. So one is money, one is not money. Conservatorships are very, very difficult. It's an online program that you have to account for every single penny, and most families and even the professional agencies don't like to get into those unless they have to. So that it's very difficult to find guardians in conservatorships. Very, very difficult, because most families do not want to take those on. So we're always looking. But I said Lutheran Social Services is our go-to one for most of ours, or the agency in an emergency.
So, Renee, when in the process of preparing this panel and having conversations with people, I've heard of situations where locally, where people have been scammed out of their, that they have given away so much money that they've lost their homes. Have you heard of situations like that?
I have personally not worked with anybody on that realm. This one that I mentioned before, we stopped some of that from happening. The other thing is, too, if we have people that come in and they're applying for financial assistance, and we know that there was some money, we think there was, we can go back 5 years and check out all financial transactions for the last 5 years. That offers some protection, and it will prevent some people from making those decisions to take other people's money if they know that they're going to pay for that person's care in a facility. We also have situations where family members will say, well, I took care of mom, dad, whatever, for X number of years, so can't I be entitled to some portion of mom or dad's money? And it's like, no, you can't unless you have a receipt showing you did this or that. So, yeah, I don't know home specifically. It's mostly
Okay.
large sums of money.
Okay, wonderful. Is there any other, does anybody else have any other questions? Well, I thank you all so much for your time today. It has been, since the beginning initial conversation that I had about this, probably back in January, there has just been more and more things that have come to light and shown a need for this kind of conversation. And I really did want to have our local professionals talk about it so that we know that who to go to, that we know who to go to, and that we can find out the resources that we need to resolve issues. And I just appreciate your honest opinions and telling us about the things that you know, that these scams, frauds and scams and financial exploitation can happen to anybody at any time, any age, and it can be from small amounts to very large amounts. And when it comes to the financial institutions and law enforcement, they often cannot get those funds back for you. We all have the ability to choose to spend our money the way that we want to, even if we're making poor choices, and there's no protection against that. So I thank you all. We are going to make sure to list contact information for each of you at the end of our presentation. So thank you so much and have a great day.
So I have with me today Don and Debbie Alleman. They are the parents of Darcy Sullivan. Darcy and I were having a conversation about the recording of our financial exploitation panel, and she said, and she called me up one day and she said, this happened to my parents. And this just happened in the last little bit. And so they were kind enough to tell us a little bit about what happened to them and how close they came to actually having giving away information that might have been important to financial information that might have been important. And when we recorded the panel, we found that this can happen to anybody, and it does happen all the time in our own community. The important part is when people talk about it. When they talk about it, you hear about the current scams that are going on, and you're less likely to be fooled by them. So I just want to thank you, Debbie and Don, for telling us a little bit more about this, because you're actually really helping people by doing so. So can you tell me what happened when somebody tried to abscond with funds from you? Can you tell me the story?
Well, it was about 9:30 in the morning. Got a call, phone call, answered. Grandma? Yes, my doll. Oh, Grandma, I spent the night in the hospital. What? I was in a car accident. I'm okay. I have a hairline fracture, jawline fracture. But I'm at the police station now. They're questioning me. I may be charged. I'm in Boston. What? I'm in Boston, Grandma. I come here with my friend and her mother. My parents don't know. Our friend, our mutual friend from school, moved here last year. Well, she was bulimic and she committed suicide. What? What? We were at a gathering, Grandma. I just had a little glass of wine, not full. My friend had more than one glass, so she asked me if I could drive. We got T-boned at an intersection. It was the other lady's fault. Well, how is she? What? She's still being treated at the hospital. Graham, it wasn't my fault. I'm waiting for a public defender. I'm just about crying. Grandma, don't tell my parents, please. Oh, we've got to, Nora. I said, Nora. No, no, please, Grandma, don't. I would rather tell my dad myself. Then my husband took the phone.
And all this time I was hearing her talking so I took the phone. I thought, what the heck? And it was my granddaughter's voice. There's no doubt in my mind it was her voice. And she said,
Your
"Yeah,
16-year-old granddaughter.
right." And I said, how can this be? How could they get to Boston? But it's doable. It's overnight on a plane. And of course, right away, I'm getting mad thinking, what kind of a parent, could take somebody else's kid out of state without their permission or their knowledge, But she said, no, I'm out here, she says. I says, I don't know, Nora. I said, this sounds like a scam to me. No, Grandpa, it's really me. It's really me, she says. And I'd bet you $500 it was her voice on the phone. So, of course, after hearing my wife getting all upset, I bought right into it. She said, there'll be a public defender calling you shortly. And then she says, okay, officer, I'm just about done. Like somebody was trying to take her
Interrupt her.
phone, So sure enough, this guy calls, and I mean, it wasn't 5 minutes. And he says, yeah, he says, we're probably going to drop the charges after we review the traffic surveillance camera. And I said, this is so out of character for her. I said, she's on the principal's list. I says, and her mother doesn't let her go out of the house, let alone stay overnight at somebody's place, And yeah, he said, I think she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He says, and I'll get the clerk of court, I'll get a hold of him and he'll call you with the bond and we'll get her back to Minnesota for you. And she shouldn't have to come back out here, he says, for the hearing. So, and he gives me his name and his phone number, and I had a thing on my desk that would tell me where the area codes are. So I looked, yeah, it's from Boston, all right. And it's probably 10 minutes and this clerk of court calls. And well, before Nora hung up, she says, don't tell my parents. I'd rather stay in jail than let you tell my dad, she says. Well, I didn't agree to it, but I says, well, I don't know. But anyways, so this clerk of court calls and I says, well, he says, well, we'll get the bond set up and we'll get her on a plane, get her back to Minnesota for you. And I said, well, I got a credit card here. I said, I can give you a credit card number. And I was actually reaching for my credit card already. And well, no, he said, that ain't it. He says, she's from out of state. So it's got to be a cash bond. And, all this stuff is there's enough belief in it, that I was getting sucked in. And normally I don't fall for this stuff,
You already said that you thought it was a scam. You'd
Well,
already said one time out loud.
I had that suspicion, but there was enough truth in everything that it was plausible.
Mhm.
But when he said cash, then that kind of put the brakes on it. Now, wait a minute here. I've never heard of this, They don't care if it's credit card or check as long as it's good money,
Right.
So then he says, well, you go to the bank and get the cash, he says, and call me back and I'll tell you how to sell it or send it out to me. So I hung up and then I told my wife, I says, I'm going to call her dad and just see, Well, I didn't have his work phone number, so I had to call Darcy. So I called Darcy, hey, I says, how's it going? I need Rob's phone number. I didn't want to alert her to anything in case it was, And, oh, they're doing good. She said, Joe's in his room on his computer at class and Nora's at the table at her class. I said, Nora's there. Yeah, she said, why wouldn't she be? Well, then I got mad. Madder than I was to start with, The whole thing was a scam. So I never did call the guy back. I called the law enforcement and he says, well, you may as well throw them phone numbers away. He said, they're no good.
He called you back again.
Well, I
after
had
that
called
call.
there and then she had to get a hold of this deputy that deals with it. So, but it was, that money could have been gone real fast.
How much were they asking for?
$5,700. And I thought that was kind of high for a misdemeanor traffic accident, But it had to be $5,700 cash. Now I talked to, and this deputy at law enforcement, Jim Kennedy, he says, the best thing you can do is tell everybody you know. He says, so of course I'm telling all my neighbors. And at least 4 of my neighbors had that happen to some of their relatives.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, his one of them is, he said his mother actually had the cash at the counter at the bank. And the person with her says, we gotta find out why. And she actually had the kid's phone number and she called him and, well, he says, I'm at work. Why? So the whole scam was on her. She could have had that, and hers was $7,000. So they just pushed the money back in the bank and it never left town. But it's scary how many that can happen to, you know?
Well, and how
Really?
close it was to happening to you. I mean, if it
Oh,
would have been,
absolutely.
they would have accepted that credit card, it
Well,
would have
you
been
got
gone.
it part off pretty fast, you know,
Yeah.
once I found out, but the cash would have been gone, you know?
He had numbers. You had bond or numbers to send it.
I just had his phone numbers.
Oh, I
He
thought,
was, when I called him back with the cash, he was gonna tell me how to send it.
oh,
And I've heard some people have actually sent it through border boxes. They'll tell them to put it in an envelope and ship it out on border boxes.
Well, and what we learned through the other professionals that we talked to is that that's because cash cannot be, they, your credit card is protected.
right.
And if somebody steals from you through your credit card, that money is protected and can be gotten, you can get it back.
Yeah.
If somebody uses it improperly or sells the information and makes inappropriate withdrawals. But if it's cash, the police
it's
can't
gone.
get it back to you and the bank can't get it back to you. You're
Right.
out that money, period. It's not traceable.
Right.
And that's why they prefer to do it that way.
Mhm.
Ugh.
I actually had called my son across the river. He's got 2 stepdaughters and a daughter over there. And I says, you sit them girls down and you get a code word for each girl.
Mhm.
And afterwards I was thinking I should have asked Nora who's feeding her, I always called her dumb dog, but I could have asked her who's feeding her new puppy or something that she doesn't have, just to see if this person on the phone would have picked up on that. I
Right,
firmly believe that they may have hacked into the school's computers so that they learn their voices. I don't know if they have apps on these phones now that can change the voice.
She sounded like Nora.
Because it was her voice. I will tell you to this day, it was her voice on the phone.
Well, and
It was that real.
but I think that because it's pulled on your heartstrings, it caused you, I
Yeah.
mean, it is easier to be fooled when
Oh,
you think
certainly.
it's your, and how many of us have a 16-year-old, you know, a 12 to 18-year-old young girl in our lives? A lot of us do.
She had just got her driver's permit like 6 weeks ago, so how they knew she had that, I don't know. You know, it got me pretty hot thinking about it, how much effort they put into setting the scam up, you know.
So how many calls do they actually make to your home?
3.
3.
Three calls.
The young girl, whoever it was, if it was even a girl, I have no idea, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other, so-called public defender and the so-called clerk of court. Well, all within 20 minutes at least.
And what did he say about our courthouse being?
Oh, he even said, yeah, he said, I see that your courthouse is still closed down due to COVID, which is kind of unusual, he says. So he knew our courthouse was not up running full.
But you can pull that information. So,
Yeah.
so if you think about it, you pull a paper from a small town, which, you know, and most newspapers have a Facebook page or something like that. And you get some information about president's lists or, you know, on the A honor roll or this or that or the other thing. And you've got a couple of names to start with. You can really through, if that's what your job is to do some research
Yeah.
and find numbers,
Yeah.
names and numbers of people who've got, you know, in the 12th grade A honor roll.
Mhm.
They may not have known Nora's name, but you gave it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as soon as she said Nora, she had it.
Yeah, which is, but we're trusting people and we're not expecting to be scammed, but so easily that money could have been given. And so I want to say that you live in the same town as your daughter and your granddaughter,
Correct, yep,
and this still happened.
still happened.
Yeah.
There
I
was
mean-
enough possibility in the whole story that it could have fit.
Right.
But-
So once they just got on the computer and looked at information about our town and websites told that.
This
So
was all in about 45 minutes to an hour.
it was just boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
And emotionally you would be at
Oh,
very
all
high
right.
level, not,
Oh,
not thinking straight because you're concerned about,
you just want to get her back to home, you know?
right?
That distance of
Yeah.
Boston and the Falls, you know,
Mhm.
was just,
Mhm.
It was kind of shocking. Once the dust settled, it was like, man,
Right.
normally I don't fall for that stuff at all, but
But I
the
think that when it involves your granddaughter, when
Right.
it involves your grandchild,
absolutely.
or, you know, that is really difficult to protect yourself against. And there was just enough plausible truth for
Yep.
you for them to suck you in, which again, um, people like this have nothing to do all day but
Mhm.
figure out ways to separate you from your money.
Right.
And, you know, there's all kinds of things that they can do. They just pick a town, look at the you know, at the paper, at the newspaper, the Facebook page for the town, and they can, you know, get a lot of information with very little that we
Mhm.
wouldn't even think about. So Don and Debbie, I just want to thank you so much for sharing this
Mm.
with us, because as the officer said, knowing about specific scams will protect other people from those specific scams. And
Mhm.
that's why we need to talk about it. I think that there probably are quite a few people in our community who um, have been separated from their money in the same way, but they're not talking about it
Yeah.
because it's embarrassing.
Oh, sir.
And it really is. However, because we're honest and trusting, we expect other people to be honest and trusting. And so I just really thank you for taking the time to tell us about this story, to let us know what happened, because you're protecting other people from having the same thing happen to them. So thank you,
Thank
Don
you.
and Debbie Alleman. Thank you, Darcy Sullivan. I appreciate your time, and have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you.
You as well.